Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating piece of SAP Convergent Invoicing, the multi-level control framework. If you're working in a high-volume billing environment, you already know the drill. There is this constant, almost unavoidable tension between needing lightning-fast automated mass processing and, still requiring precise, granular manual control for those really tricky exceptions. So how exactly does SAP manage to pull this off without breaking a sweat? Well, let's find out.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. First up, the high volume challenge. Then we'll break down the 3 tiers. Level 1 is the master process. Level 2 covers the scenario dials. And finally, Level 3 is all about the manual override.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the high volume challenge. So here's the million-dollar question. How do we keep mass parallel invoicing incredibly streamlined and fast while still actually allowing for human intervention when things inevitably don't go perfectly? When you're running billing in SAP, obviously, you want the system to do as much heavy lifting as possible in the background. But let's be real, business isn't always perfect. You absolutely need a way to step in and make tweaks without entirely derailing the automated machine.
To really put this into perspective, just picture a standard telecom or utilities scenario. You're easily pumping out well over 100,000 daily billing records. At that kind of scale, automated processing isn't just a nice-to-have, it's literally essential for your survival. But on the flip side, if an administrator can't easily jump in to handle a weird billing exception or a manual clarification, that system rigidity becomes incredibly risky. You need an architecture that can flawlessly process 100,000 automated invoices, but still let you tweak just one of them on the fly.
To solve this massive challenge, SAP uses this absolutely brilliant 3-tiered switchboard framework. It's specifically designed to optimize performance by ensuring that only the required processing logic is executed. So it basically steps down from the static courses control at level 1, refines it for specific scenarios at level 2, and then finally hands over dynamic runtime control at level 3.
Moving right along to Section 2. Let's look at Level 1, the master process.
Okay, at this highest level, think of it as your main master container. Notice how this one little checkbox, function can be activated or sometimes called function optional, completely dictates the flow of your invoicing logic. During customizing, you explicitly assign specific invoicing functions to this master process. Now, if a function is assigned but you do not check that box, it becomes mandatory, period. It's always going to run and you can't stop it later. If you completely omit a function from this list, it's excluded entirely. It just doesn't exist for this process. But if you do check that box, it becomes optional. You're basically passing the control down the funnel, telling the system, hey, we might need this, but let's decide on the details later.
Which brings us to Section 3, Level 2, Scenario Dials.
So for all those functions that we just flagged as optional up in Level 1, we now have to refine their actual execution behavior. We do this by mapping them to specific business scenarios, like, say, a standard periodic billing run versus a final contract termination. This mapping is based on a combination of the invoicing type and the invoicing category, which you define on the customer's contract account. Once we've got that combination, we assign one of 3 very specific activation statuses.
This is where it gets really clever. The crucial point is how these 3 statuses behave. Status 1 basically locks the optional function on permanently for this scenario. It'll run automatically and literally cannot be skipped at runtime. Status 2 means the function is active by default, but, and here's the kicker, it can be manually turned off by a user later during dialog processing. And status 3? That means the function is inactive by default, but a user can choose to manually turn it on. Statuses 2 and 3 are exactly where you give your administrators that incredible, granular flexibility.
And right here is exactly where in the SAP GUI you map those statuses. Next to your listed functions, you've got this drop-down to assign status 1, 2, or 3. This is where your business rules really take shape. By the way, if an optional function isn't mapped to your active invoicing type and category combination right here, it simply won't be performed at all and cannot be modified later. This level strictly defines your rules of engagement.
Finally, we've reached Section 4, Level 3. Manual override.
I like to think of this system as operating in 2 distinct modes. On one hand, you have your automatic mass invoicing that's running incredibly fast, smoothly, and rigidly in the background. On the other hand, you have invoicing in dialog. This is where you execute individual creations using transaction FKINV_S.
When you run this in expert mode, that granular control we've been carefully building up through levels 1 and 2 is finally unleashed for individual exception handling.
So by checking that little expert mode box during individual creation, you trigger a dynamic selection dialog box. Once that pops up, the administrator can view the active functions and dynamically check or uncheck them on the fly for that specific invoice run. They can activate those status 3 functions we talked about or deactivate those status 2 functions. But remember, anything you lock down as mandatory in level 1 or as status 1 here in level 2 remains firmly locked. You only get to play with the flexible dials that you specifically designed for them.
Honestly, getting this tiered mechanism set up correctly is a total game changer. It ensures your automated mass parallel runs stay highly streamlined while totally empowering your users. Oh, and if you are currently configuring this in your system as an architect or administrator, we can actually pull the exact SPRO customizing paths for each of these 3 steps to help guide your setup.
As you review or design your own billing architecture, I want you to ask yourself this one thing. Does your current setup truly protect your high-volume automated processing while still empowering your business users with absolute, targeted control over those inevitable manual exceptions? The multi-level control framework is the absolute key to achieving that perfect balance. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep optimizing.